We have our correspondent, Ms. Akano. She will be expanding on some breaking top developing stories coming in from the United States of America. Now, good evening to you, Ms. Akano.
Good evening, Metafriado GolfeTV viewers. In his first address to the annual meeting of world leaders at the United Nations on Tuesday, U.S. President Joseph Biden called for a new age of global solidarity in the face of the COVID-19, climate change, and insecurity challenges. To put it simply, we are at a historic crossroads, he said. We must collaborate like never before. Mr. Biden informed UN General Assembly leaders that the U.S. wants to work with allies to help lead the world toward a more peaceful and prosperous future for all, highlighting that governments must continue to coordinate to deliver equal prosperity, peace, and security for all. He described the endeavor as being as crucial and essential now as it was 76 years ago. President Biden reaffirmed his decision to withdraw U.S. soldiers from Afghanistan, emphasizing that this marks the beginning of a new era of intense American diplomacy. He added that the use of force should be our instrument of last resort, not our first, and that priority should be shifted away from 2 decades of conflicts and toward newly emerging threats. The president lamented the 4.5 million COVID-related deaths globally, referring to each as an individual heartbreak, and emphasized the need to act immediately to get shots and arms as soon as possible and increase access to oxygen, testing, and treatments to save lives throughout the world. Without criticizing his predecessor, President emphasized that his administration has turned away from an America First approach and toward one of multilateralism. He also commented on a new U.S. target under the Paris Agreement to decrease greenhouse gas emissions to 50% below 2005 levels by 2030, as well as expenditures under consideration with Congress, including greenhouse infrastructure and electric vehicles. He stated that the U.S. will lead with our principles and power to stand up for allies and friends. And as the U.S. states attempts to galvanize the world to action, Mr. Biden promised we will lead not only with the example of our power, but God willing, the power of our example.
Why has Donald Trump gone ahead to sue his niece and the New York Times? What does the former president stand to gain from this?
Former President Donald Trump filed a $100 million lawsuit on Tuesday against his own niece, Mary Trump, and the New York Times, saying they conspired to acquire his tax records for the paper's Pulitzer-winning article on his undisclosed finances. According to the suit, Mary Trump and 3-time journalist Russell Brittner David Barstow and Susan Gregg were involved in an insidious plot and an extensive crusade to acquire Trump's taxes. According to the lawsuit, the defendants engaged in an insidious plot to obtain confidential and highly sensitive documents, which they exploited for their own benefit and utilized to legitimize their publicized work falsely. Gregg, Barstow, and Bertner were awarded the Pulitzer Prize for explanatory reporting in 2019 for their series of pieces gave the public an unparalleled insight at Trump's finances. Mary has said that she sent Trump's tax return to the Times in her best-selling 2020 book about her uncle, Too Much and Never Enough: How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Men, as well as in media appearances, which the lawsuit mentioned. In the book, Trump's brother Fred Jr.'s daughter presents an unauthoritative image of Donald J. Trump and the toxic family that made him. Mary Trump described her uncle as desperate in a statement. "I believe he is a loser who will throw whatever he can against the wall. It is a sign of desperation. The walls are closing in on Trump, and he is throwing whatever he thinks will stick against them," she added. As is always the case with Donald, he will attempt to change the subject. The New York Times said in a statement that they intend to fight the case. The lawsuit says that Mary Trump breached a confidentiality agreement that prevented her from publicly disclosing information of the family's finance under the terms of Fred Trump Sr. estate settlement. This is our breaking news for tonight. Thank you for having me on Focal Point. Good night.
Well, thank you, Ms. Akano, for expounding to our viewers today's breaking stories coming in from the United States. Good night to you, and catch you same time on Monday next week. Now, coming up are the figures of COVID-19 affected cases, deaths, recoveries in some West African countries.